The House Republican Policy Committee will come to order. Representative Jones, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Thank you, members, for making the trip in. Thank you to our members who are joining us online. My name is David Rowe. I have the privilege of serving as the representative for the 85th Legislative District that covers Union, Snyder, Juniata, and Mifflin counties. I also have the honor of serving as the chairman of the House Republican Policy Committee. We're going to start off by letting the members introduce themselves and where they hail from, starting with our host, Representative Schlegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to everyone. My name is John Schlegel, and I represent the 101st Legislative District in the heart of Lebanon County, and we're here in Lebanon City, so it's great to be here.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Russ Diamond from the 102nd Legislative District, which is mostly the rural parts of Lebanon County.
Good afternoon now, everybody. My name is Tom Jones. I'm the state representative for the 98th Legislative District, which is the northern half of Lancaster County and the much more exciting southwest corner of Lebanon County.
Good morning, everybody. Aiden Shanley with Senator McCormick's office.
Thank you guys very much for making the trip out here. It's wonderful to be here in Lebanon City. As I was mentioning to the mayor before we started, my grandmother spent most of her life here, just a mile or so away over on Colebrook Road. I spent many a summers here, many a Thanksgivings, many a New Year's. We were bonding over some of the wonderful things that Lebanon has to offer. Lebanon bologna sandwiches are still a staple very much in our family. Van Winkle's Opera Fudge was part of our family's traditional Christmas gift to all of our neighbors. So it's just really wonderful to be back here. A lot of wonderful memories. I'm going to be taking a drive by her house as soon as we leave here today, take a little trip down memory lane. So thank you very much for hosting us here, Representative Schlegel. Today marks the final hearing in a series focused on homeownership and housing affordability across Pennsylvania. Over the past week, we've traveled to different communities, heard a consistent message. Rising construction costs, permitting delays, infrastructure challenges, zoning barriers, really all lead to a growing shortage of attainable housing options. We've heard from building professionals, local officials, and realtors. They all recognize that this issue is affecting not only households, but also employers, workforce growth, and the long-term strength of our rural communities. This conversation isn't just about housing markets or development trends, it's about people at the end of the day. It's about young families trying to buy their first home. It's about seniors hoping to remain in their communities near their families and friends. It's about working Pennsylvanians who are being priced out of the neighborhoods where they grew up and individuals who feel like stability and ownership are just simply slipping out of reach. So as policymakers, our job is to have a responsibility to ask not only what is causing these challenges, but what practical solutions can help more people succeed, especially those who are already struggling the most. So today we're looking for solutions to expand opportunity, increase access, reduce unnecessary barriers, cut red tape, and make homeownership more attainable for all the working families across the Commonwealth. Before I move to Representative Schlegel for remarks, I'd like to recognize that we are also joined online by Representative Shoren, representing Montgomery County in the 147th District, Representative Perry Stanbaugh, representing Juniata and Perry counties in the 86th Legislative District, as well as Policy Committee Vice Chair Christian Marcel from Bucks County. Thank you all for joining us online. With that, turn it over to Representative Schlegel for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and thank you to everyone joining us today for this important discussion on affordable housing. I appreciate the testimony and perspectives that will be shared by advocates, local officials, builders, and community organizations. As Chairman Rao has already mentioned, affordable housing is a concern in communities across Pennsylvania. Families, seniors on fixed incomes, young professionals, first-time home buyers, and working families are all feeling the pressure of rising housing costs and limited availability. Strong communities begin with opportunity, personal responsibility, and economic growth. Housing policy should reflect those principles by encouraging investment, reducing unnecessary barriers, promoting practical solutions that help people achieve stability and independence. Today's hearing is an opportunity to examine the factors contributing to the housing shortages and affordability concerns. This conversation should not be about one-size-fits-all mandates. Local flexibility and public-private partnership will continue to play an important role in addressing these challenges. I look forward to hearing today's testimony and having a constructive conversation focused on practical, responsible solutions to help address this important topic. Thank you to all for being here.
Thank you very much, Representative Schlegel, for hosting us today. We've got two fantastic panels today, folks that we are excited to learn from, to ask questions of. We're going to start off with our first panel, who's already seated here. Madam Mayor Sherry Capello, thank you very much for hosting us in your wonderful city. Congratulations, no tax increases for 11 years. As a former municipal official myself, I know that that is a tough thing to do.
Thank you.
Because prices go up and budgets get tighter every year, so well done on that. Caitlin Lockhart, she's the Executive Director of Lebanon Housing Collaborative. Thank you very much for being here. And Kyle Wegner, owner of Revital Home Company. Did I pronounce that right? Revital Home. I was going to say it was one or the other. Thank you very much for being here today. We're going to start off with you guys. We're going to turn it over to you. We'd love to hear from you, 3 to 5 minutes of remarks, and then we're going to turn it over to members for questions. When we get to questions, we are here to learn from you, so members might ask the panel a question as a whole or an individual, but still you are welcome to jump in at any point if you've got something to offer. We're here to hear from you. So Madam Mayor, we're going to start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the Pennsylvania House Republican Policy Committee, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Sherry Capello, and I serve as the mayor of Lebanon. I appreciate the committee's willingness to hear directly from local officials who are working every day on the front lines of Pennsylvania's housing challenges. I especially appreciate the committee's desire to hear practical, on-the-ground experience and real-world challenges facing our communities. Too often, housing discussions happen at a theoretical level, but local governments are dealing directly with the actual impacts these policies have on families, neighborhoods, employers, and economic growth. In Lebanon City, housing is not simply a development issue. It is directly tied to affordability, workforce retention, economic opportunity, neighborhood stability, and quality of life. The city recently completed a housing needs assessment, and the findings confirmed what we are experiencing every day. Lebanon City has an estimated housing gap of nearly 2,000 units over the next 5 years, including more than 1,400 rental units and over 500 for sale units. The shortage exists at nearly every affordability level. Our vacancy rates are extremely low, only 0.5% for multifamily apartments, while affordable housing developments maintain waiting lists in the thousands. At the same time, families are facing financial pressures unlike anything we have seen in years. The rising costs of groceries, gas, utilities, insurance, and everyday living expenses, combined with the rapidly increasing cost of housing itself, have significantly reduced the ability of many residents to afford home ownership. Even when families qualify financially, the cost of purchasing and maintaining a home often makes home ownership feel unattainable. In many cases, there is simply not enough financial incentive or opportunity available for working families to pursue home ownership successfully. We are seeing this challenge firsthand through local housing programs. The city partners closely with the Lebanon County Redevelopment Authority, which administers a countywide first-time homebuyer program using home funding through the Pennsylvania Department of Community and Economic Development. While we greatly appreciate this funding source, the reality on the ground is that the program has become increasingly difficult to utilize effectively. One challenge is a cap placed on acquisition costs for eligible homes. In today's housing market, very few available homes fall within those price limitations. Additionally, the property must fully comply with home program standards and code requirements at the time it is sold to the home buyer. In practice, many affordable homes require rehabilitation before they can qualify. This means the Redevelopment Authority must first acquire the property using its own funds, complete the rehab work to home standards, and only then sell the home to the first-time buyer. The practical question becomes, where are local agencies supposed to obtain the upfront acquisition and rehab funding needed to make these projects work? The program did not always operate this way, and the increased complexity has made implementation significantly more difficult for local communities. Similarly, our Lebanon City Land Bank has faced major changes in how it acquires properties. Originally, the land bank was designed to utilize judicial tax sales to acquire blighted or abandoned homes at reduced cost for rehab and resale to owner occupants. However, in today's market, very few properties ever make it to judicial sale. Instead, properties are increasingly purchased at sheriff's sale or sold privately before ever reaching that stage. As a result, the land bank has had to shift toward private acquisition, which often means purchasing properties at or near market value. Despite the fact that these homes typically require substantial rehabilitation, the financial reality is difficult. By the time acquisition, construction, code compliance, and carrying costs are added together, the total investment often exceeds what the property can reasonably sell for to an owner-occupant household. Programs such as FAIR funding through the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency have been incredibly valuable in helping address these gaps. Our land bank has successfully used FAIR funds for acquisition and rehab projects, while the Redevelopment Authority utilizes FAIR funding for housing accessibility improvements and senior home repair programs. However, because FAIR is one of the more flexible and effective housing funding tools available, it has become extremely competitive statewide. Demand for these limited dollars continues to grow, while local needs continue to outpace available resources. Another practical challenge local governments face is program consistency. We deeply appreciate the state staff members who work with us and provide technical assistance. But when policies, interpretations, or program requirements change frequently, often with new program management, it becomes difficult for local agencies and nonprofit partners to sustain momentum and effectively plan long-term projects. Housing development and rehab projects take years to complete. Stability and predictability in program administration are critically important. Another reality we face is that many housing assistance programs have extremely strict income limitations. While those programs serve an important purpose, they often leave out working families who earn too much to qualify for assistance, but not enough to realistically afford today's housing costs. At the same time, even when buyers qualify for assistance, there is an extremely limited supply of homes available to purchase. The city is now exploring additional tools, including the use of federal community development block grant funds for mortgage subsidy or down payment assistance programs. However, even those programs face practical market limitations. Although the allowable purchase cap was recently increased to approximately $234,000, many homes now exceed that amount due to rising market values. In other words, the funding tools often no longer match the realities of the housing market. Despite these challenges, cities like Lebanon are also filled with opportunity. One of the greatest opportunities we see is the adaptive reuse of underutilized upper floors in our downtown buildings. Across Pennsylvania's older communities, we have beautiful historic buildings with vacant upper stories sitting above active storefronts. These spaces could provide desperately needed housing while simultaneously revitalizing downtown historic districts. However, one of the largest barriers is the cost of bringing these buildings into compliance with modern building and life safety codes, particularly elevator systems and fire suppression sprinkler systems required under Pennsylvania's Uniform Construction Code. Private property owners are often willing to invest in the apartments themselves. The challenge is the extraordinary cost of the code compliance infrastructure needed to make these projects feasible. I previously raised this issue directly with Governor Shapiro and Lieutenant Governor Davis during a meeting with fellow mayors from across Pennsylvania. I encouraged the creation of a dedicated state funding stream specifically designed to help municipalities, developers, and property owners offset the costs associated with elevators, sprinkler systems, and other major code compliance improvements tied to upper floor residential conversions. This type of targeted investment could transform communities across Pennsylvania. It would create housing without additional suburban sprawl, preserve historic buildings, revitalize downtowns, expand the tax base, support small businesses, and strengthen workforce attraction and retention efforts. Most importantly, it would represent practical policy informed by real-world local experience. Local governments are doing their part. We are collaborating with counties, redevelopment authorities, land banks, nonprofits, developers, and housing organizations to address these challenges creatively and responsibly. But local governments cannot solve this crisis alone. State policy decisions matter. Funding flexibility matters. Program consistency matters. And practical implementation matters. I encourage this committee to continue engaging directly with municipalities because local leaders see firsthand how these policies affect real families and real communities every single day. Housing is not just about buildings, it's about economic opportunity, workforce stability, public safety, neighborhood vitality, and the future success of Pennsylvania communities. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, and I would be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Capello. Director Lockhart.
Yes. Sorry, I'm stealing the microphone. So good morning. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak today about housing challenges and opportunity in the Commonwealth, but also in Lebanon County. So in 2023, like the mayor mentioned, Lebanon County completed a comprehensive housing needs assessment that examined housing availability, affordability, the demographic trends, and the economic pressures across our county. Through community feedback, we learned something that was also very clear, and that's that Lebanon County has a housing shortage across every single socioeconomic level. The Lebanon County Housing Collaborative is a direct result of that study, which was built and created to address the challenge through coordination, planning, education, partnership development, and policy advocacy. My role as Housing Development Director is to help connect municipalities, directors, developers, nonprofits, housing authorities, employers, health systems, and community organizations into a more coordinated housing development pipeline. Our work spans the full housing continuum: prevention efforts to help residents remain housed, intervention during crisis situations, preservation of existing housing stock, and development strategies that expand housing opportunities across income levels. We're working regionally with neighboring counties, including Dauphin, Cumberland, York, Perry, Franklin, and Adams counties, because housing pressures do not stop at county lines. One of the clearest things that we have heard from agencies is that individuals who are exiting crisis situations are often forced to navigate extremely limited placement options, including survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence, seniors, families who experience homelessness, and those with mental health issues and disabilities. Housing providers and service agencies are reporting longer wait lists, increased difficulty placing seniors, and growing challenges finding units that are affordable and accessible for residents with lower or fixed incomes. At the same time, Lebanon County continues to experience population and household growth, particularly among older adults. The 2023 Housing Needs Assessment projected that senior households would experience some of the most significant growth over the coming years, increasing pressure on an already limited supply of affordable and accessible senior housing. We are also seeing increased pressure on workforce households. Lebanon County has a strong employment base, but many of our workers, including those in manufacturing, retail, healthcare support, and in service industries, are struggling to find housing options near where they work that align with their incomes. The result is that many higher earners leave the county to work, and those who work here cannot afford housing, which leads to a deep economic imbalance. The good news is that there is practical and achievable strategies that can help communities to respond. One important area is zoning and land use flexibility. Municipalities that allow mixed-use development, accessory dwelling units, duplexes, small family housing, adaptive reuse, and upper floor residential conversions create more opportunities for housing choice while still maintaining clear community character. We need stronger public-private partnerships that help developers to better understand funding opportunities and to reduce barriers that make workforce and affordable housing difficult to build. In addition, housing policy should continue focusing not only on crisis response, but also on prevention, helping residents to remain housed before instability turns into homelessness. Finally, continued public education and constructive dialogue around housing are critical. Communities benefit when residents better understand the role that different housing types play in supporting seniors, workforce households, young families, and overall economic stability. The path forward will require coordination across sectors. Expanding housing supply, preserving existing housing, supporting residents before a crisis occurs, and aligning housing with workforce and health systems are all part of creating a stronger and more resilient Commonwealth and Lebanon County. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Director Lockhart. Mr. Winger.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Kyle Wenger. I'm 34 years old, a lifelong resident of Lebanon County, small business owner of Revital Home Company. When I say small, it's literally just me with a team of subcontractors that I've worked with now for over a decade. I mainly invest in real estate. I'm a self-proclaimed housing enthusiast. I love what I do. Over the last several years, I've spent much of my time buying distressed homes, neglected apartment buildings, and underused properties throughout the county and trying to bring them back to life. I'd say what I do is fairly hands-on. I'm often driving around neighborhoods, looking at properties, looking for opportunity, talking to owners, talking to motivated sellers, raising private capital, meeting with private lenders, people who want to invest in the community but don't have the boots on the ground experience that maybe I do. They have the money, they don't have the opportunities. I coordinate with contractors. I feel like I solve a lot of problems. Try and figure out how to take something deteriorating and make it useful again. That allows me to get a return on the capital invested. I'd say many times these are not easy projects. These are properties that have tremendous amounts of deferred maintenance, vacancy, often mismanaged, from a tired landlord, slumlord, if you will, aging mechanical systems, roofs, plumbing, electrical, all that, code issues, condemnation, buildings simply that people stopped investing in. I take on these projects, oftentimes very difficult, but I do it because I genuinely want to see improvement. That's the kind of the fulfillment part for me, is taking something run down and making it useful again and active back in the community. That's kind of the mission for Revital Home Company. It's bigger than just simply renovating buildings. It's providing quality housing for people that need it. I wouldn't say it's luxury, but I wouldn't say it's bottom of the barrel. It's just clean, safe, housing that's updated, that our county, city desperately needs, in my opinion. I'm not here as an expert, policy expert or academic. I'm standing here as someone who's kind of boots in the ground, works in housing every day, works with a variety of different people, tenants, contractors, municipalities, third-party vendors, insurance, all that type of stuff. And really just try and figure out a way to make these projects work and stay in budget, and it's extremely difficult. I honestly want to be honest about affordable housing conversations. I think sometimes most of what I do probably is not considered affordable housing. Renovating housing is expensive, labor's expensive, materials are expensive, insurance, utilities, permits, financing costs, cost of money, it all adds up. When you take a building that needs fully renovated, there's a financial reality to that process. I also don't think affordability is simply just what is the cheapest rent. I think affordable needs to be safe, it needs to be updated. We need to preserve, existing housing stock and improve it. I also, I'm a landlord. I manage about 80 rental units throughout Lebanon County. I do participate in Section 8 housing in some capacity. I also work with the HUD-VASH program, where I rent to veterans in need of housing. I work closely with those organizations to identify people in need, and I do my best to collaborate with those organizations. I will be candid, though, sometimes that means accepting lower rent than I probably could have got if I took it to the market. Also, it means more paperwork oftentimes, inspections, oversight, coordination. But I choose to participate in those, in those programs because I believe, people just need a place to live, and I'm willing to give them that opportunity. And I'm in this for the long run, so I'd rather have someone stay for multiple years than a few months. One thing I've learned is, private housing providers, we can't solve this affordability problem alone. For a guy like me, there's a lot of things in consideration, whether it's, rising interest rates, rising costs of materials and labor, it all has an effect on, the cost of everything and ultimately what I could sell it for or what I could rent it for. In my opinion, Lebanon County has what I'd call a missing middle housing problem. We don't build enough duplexes, triplexes, or small apartment buildings or practical infill development. I dream of the day where we can take a property sitting on a quarter acre and develop that into 10, 12, or even 20 apartment units. It's just not viable at the moment with current zoning code. Parking requirements being a big one, setback requirements, density restrictions. A lot of that for a small guy like me to take on, there's a lot of cost in getting to the point of approval, and it's a lot of risk. Housing's not going to get solved with one giant project. I think it gets solved with practical projects over time. I think there are practical things we can do. Make it easier to build the missing middle housing, reduce the barriers for small infill projects, rethink parking minimums where appropriate, and like the rest of the members said here, adaptive reuse projects of older buildings, and then streamline the approval process for small local developers to kind of not overwhelm them by uncertainty. I hope that we focus on practical solutions and make this easier for local people to invest, improve neighborhoods, and create more housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wenger. We're going to turn over to the members for questions at this point. As I said before, we're here to hear from you, so please jump in if you've got something to add. I'm going to start things off. Mr. Wenger, you said it's mostly just you, right, and then a bunch of subcontractors. Who's handling the compliance, the code, all the paperwork, right, the behind-the-scenes stuff? Do you handle that in-house, or is that subcontracted out as well?
I handle that all in-house.
How much of your time is spent on that?
The more units I've acquired over time, the more administrative paperwork there's been. I would say, majority of my mornings I'm at a coffee shop doing admin work related to property management, whether it be code stuff or just making sure the rent's being collected, making sure the bills are paid, making sure the debt's being serviced, all those things. So
I think that's something that most home builders, first-time homes, if somebody wants to build a home, they don't realize what that is, right? All those costs that go up. We were up in Rep. Olsemer's district, and I mentioned that I could not live to afford where I live now if I wanted to buy a house in my community, because there's only one home for sale in the whole neighborhood, and it's listed at over $1 million. And there's only 3 new builds that have gone up in the last year, and the cheapest one is $795,000. And it's a 4-bedroom house on less than half an acre. We're not talking about Manchester. I couldn't afford to live where I live. And so you think of working families, somebody who wants to start a home, somebody who wants to move to a neighborhood, it's just completely unrealistic, and people are getting priced out of the area. So Director Lockhart or Mayor Capello, are you seeing that sort of, population bleed where people that want to come to Lebanon City to call it home are simply getting priced out? Or is that something that you haven't seen necessarily yet? Because, people are unfortunately moving away, even if it's not to other communities, it's to other states where they can simply find cheaper housing. We talked about yesterday how Virginia and Maryland and New Jersey, right, not states that you necessarily think of as like regulatory lands of freedom, but they're still outpacing us in new home builds by far. So are we losing population? Are we losing workforce because of the inability for people to want to come here, start a home, find that place to raise their family? It's just not realistic for most people.
I believe that may be a possibility for Pennsylvania. Here in Lebanon County, and in particularly Lebanon City, if you're looking at rentals, our rental, what the landlords are charging our residents is more than what you would see in an adjoining township. And they're building brand new and charging, say, $1,400, $1,500, $1,600, $1,800, and they're charging the same thing in here for older, not as nice, and they're not Kyle's properties, because his properties are beautiful. But, and that is because we're the county seat, we're the center of all the social service agencies. People need to live here for many reasons. And property owners know that, and they're able to charge higher rents. So that is very frustrating. we don't have the land to build a lot of new units. The land that we do have available that was vacant property is, we can see every year, townhouses are being built, tiny homes are being built, and most of them are rentals, rental townhouses. The tiny homes are rentals, but it's still not enough. And that is why we have to turn to the upper floor development. But because of the cost, as I stated in my testimony, of the sprinklers and the elevator requirements, the average person like Kyle, who does extremely, exceptional work, there's so many costs, especially in the last few years, that you can't afford to put in elevators and sprinkler systems. It's not feasible. For what you have to pay, even for a dilapidated, blighted property, which we don't have many of those either. When you look across the state, I've looked at the percentage, and our vacancy and our number of blighted properties is extremely low here in Lebanon City. We have an awesome property maintenance program. There's always need for improvement, but we do a great job. Another thing that we did was in 2020, June of 2020, we adopted a new zoning ordinance. We spent 2.5 years working on that ordinance. We lowered the density requirements. We allowed for tiny homes. We allowed for, a higher density in areas, but still requiring parking and things like that. And that's one of our problems that I actually didn't testify to. Renovating the upper floor development, we need that long-term parking in our downtowns because we don't want to cause a burden to the storefronts or, the business owners that are trying to park long-term during the day to sustain their businesses. We also have those residential needs for parking. So parking is definitely a problem, and in the residential zoning districts, something, because we've added so many units over the years, parking is it's congested, and there's a need to do something more with parking. So that's also a part of this equation.
Really quick, I'll just add, I think you'll find the more you dig into housing, the more you see that this is a domino effect. Housing isn't just a house. Housing is parking. Housing is updating the codes. Housing is, where am I close to social services? I think you'll find with the panel that'll test after us that there's a lot that goes into providing those social services and making sure that people are housed and okay. And just to answer your question really quick, I think part of what Lebanon County is also experiencing is what we are calling a bedroom community. So it is cheaper to live here but work somewhere where you can make more money. And part of the problem that then causes is we're pricing out people who don't have the option to leave here. I don't know what you've heard from your other testimonies, but I think it's just really important to mention, you asked, are we losing workers to other states? What's happening to the people that can't leave? What's happening to the people who are stuck here who can't afford to be here? And I think that's something that should be considered in what you're doing. The posters behind you, I think, really speak to that. And part of what I just want to make sure that we focus on today as well is those individuals who cannot have an option to leave. So while, yeah, we might lose a few people, they're still living here. They're able to leave and drive somewhere else and go get a job where they can afford to live here. But there's so many people, and the mayor did mention that, who cannot afford to live here or afford to build here. That's what I wanted to add.
One last question, and then I'll stop hogging the microphone. As a community that has presumably a lot of renters, saw a very interesting report that Pennsylvania's median rent rates have increased faster than that of New York City. How much of that is driven by whether code enforcement, things that you now have to do that you wouldn't have had to do a decade ago, whether it's the new codes coming out or some sort of compliance? How much people see rents go up, but they just assume it's, oh, these people are pocketing more money. They don't see all those behind the scenes, as you said, soft costs. So how much is your local rent rates being driven up, not because somebody's pocketing the difference, just because the state is coming in with new codes, new regs, new requirements that just drive up costs on everyone?
It's both. It's because of code requirements and the rising costs to, like Kyle testified to renovate. It's just extremely, compared to even 10 years ago, it's outrageous. Even in the last 5 years, it's just outrageous how dramatically it has increased. And the other thing is supply and demand. We're very limited with our number of housing units, whether that's for rent or for sale, and so they can charge more because it's supply and demand. They can charge more.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think when I spoke at the Housing Collaborative a month or two ago, is the price of homes has gone up so much in such a short period of time, and interest rates have gone up in that same kind of gap, that, you know, a landlord, if I was on an adjustable rate mortgage, a 5-year fixed mortgage that was at, 3.5%, that's now 6 3/4, my expenses have gone up literally overnight. If I don't raise the rent, I'm going to be negative every month, and I'm not in the business to try and lose money. I'm doing this for a living. I'm a for-profit entity. So I think that has a role too. A lot of landlords have went through this adjustable rate mortgage process where their expenses are not, their debt service is higher, and they pass that on to the tenant. And it just calls for a bunch of, chaos. I deal with it, everyone's always looking for a cheaper place to live. What I try and combat is I'd rather have my place be so nice that they don't want to leave it and they're willing to pay a little more. Not always true. They still want to move in with a relative or find somewhere cheaper or less quality.
I think,
And
Mayor, yes.
Just to add, we see a lot of that too. We see a lot of homes, even apartment units, where there's more individuals probably than there should be. And it's because we don't have the housing.
Your quote, I think, in your testimony summarized it very well, that private property owners are willing to invest in the apartments. The challenge is the extraordinary cost of code compliance infrastructure needed to make these projects feasible. And it's unfortunate when you see blighted properties come up, not because nobody wants them, but because the cost, the amount of money you'd have to put into them, it would simply be impossible to ever have a return on investment on that. So if we want to be incentivizing the private sector to do what Mr. Wenger does so well, making it affordable for them to do that is something that we can pass along to either renters or buyers down the road. Representative Jones.
Well, thank you for your testimony here today. And some of the things that we talked about, one of the things that we talked about was parking, parking limits and those sorts of things, how many vehicles are allowed on a particular lot. That plays into it. There was a package of bills that moved through the Housing Committee. I sit on the Housing Committee, and there was a lot of different things addressed by various pieces of legislation that were proposed. One is the ADUs, auxiliary dwelling units. That's something that was addressed. One thing that Mayor Capello, you mentioned was if you have a 3, 4, up to a 6-story building, I believe one of the pieces of legislation would allow basically reduce requirements to where there could just be a single stairwell. So that way you're not having to completely reconstruct. It removes some of that cost prohibitive, that the requirements that are on developing out existing buildings or older buildings. So some of the legislation that's proposed like that is, I think, a step in the right direction for opening up more housing opportunities. One of the things that Kyle, you mentioned was, Mr. Wenger, that you mentioned was about parking. Has there been any move towards, because I think what happens is, well, first of all, I live in a small town, and if somebody does an Airbnb, it's immediately a civil war over who gets that parking spot, right, on the street. People are putting chairs out, it just gets crazy. But the problem is impermeable surface. So you can't just pave over the backyard, right? If you take a home and you renovate it to be a 2-unit or a 3-unit apartment or a duplex, you can't just pave over the backyard because of creating that much more impermeable surface. Has there been any move towards the permeable pavers, where have you ever done that, where you can create off-street parking but still have the permeable surface so that you don't run into those restrictions? Is that something that's been explored, or do you see anybody doing that?
I don't have any experience with that or have come across a project where I've looked into that yet.
Okay.
I do run into issues sometimes where we have such a housing problem. I want to be able to maximize density. I want to be able to take a quarter-acre lot and maximize that to the maximum number of units I can build. The constraint there for me is the parking. It's one parking spot per one bedroom. So that where I think I could want to be able to build 18 units, I can really only build half of that. Because I can only fit 9 parking spaces. And then I'm constrained to only one-bedroom units without going and getting variances and finding other parking elsewhere. It's just, it's difficult to make the numbers work from a return standpoint to only build 8 units, new construction, stormwater management, sidewalks, the whole gamut, permitting.
Right.
You're at several $100,000 before you even get your plans approved.
Yeah. So the permitting is an issue. Another thing that was mentioned was when you go for fair funding, or organizations go for fair funding, you mentioned that you're running into this issues with stability and predictability and program administration. Do you have any suggestions as to what could be done to streamline that and bring more stability to that process? What are your suggestions that you would make to bring stability there?
I don't know, and again, we are extremely grateful for the technical assistance that we received from the state and those staff members. They have been extremely helpful. It's just whenever we see a change in leadership or program managers, sometimes like with our CDBG funding, our program income, they want you to use that first, or you're not allowed to use it. You have to send it back. And then you get a new manager and it's like, why didn't you use this? And it's like, oh, okay, well, the last program manager said we shouldn't. So it's just if there could be consistency, because like I said, these projects are long-term, they take several years. If we knew that we could use our program income, which is basically the repayment of loans, because some of these programs are loans, some are grants, some are combined, and that's another thing that changes. Sometimes we put a program together and they want it to be where the person does have to put money back, make payments back, and other times they're like, no, we want you to push out all that money and they don't have to return it. We would ask for some consistency so we can plan long-term and better utilize and be more effective with our money. If I may, very quickly, the city of Lebanon, and I know I'm just speaking for the city, we changed our zoning ordinance to allow for a larger maximum impervious area. Our problem is we have long and narrow properties, so it's very difficult to get driveways and off-street parking. We do allow for pervious pavers. We've put in pervious parking lots like a Coleman Memorial Park, and the county put one in at the Ag Center. So we do utilize those, but people don't use them frequently because there are challenges with using them if there's heavy use. So, but our difficulty is more long and narrow properties, and we don't really have an opportunity to add a lot of off-street parking, which is why, especially in the downtown, we need the parking garage.
Right. Thank you.
Chairman Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mayor Capello, in your testimony, you talked about the cap placed on acquisition costs under the home program. What is that cap?
I think it's $234,000.
Okay. And you also talked about the standards and code requirements that a particular property needs to meet when it's. Does that include like all ADA compliant stuff? What are those requirements?
So I'm mainly talking about major items like elevators and sprinkler systems. Those are the two most costly, I think, infrastructure improvements that need to be made if you're converting like storage on upper floors into residential units.
So I mean, the focus of the hearing here is basically expanding access to home ownership, but if you're doing an upstairs, downstairs kind of retail and then residential on top, I mean, that's not going to be home ownership. I don't know, unless you can like subdivide it into a condominium or anything like
Correct.
that. So, I mean, chances are we're not going to get the building owner to live upstairs. So it's going to be a rental unit.
Correct.
And I just wonder, is there no way around if you're putting a residential above a business? You absolutely, does every one of those units need to have an elevator?
If you're having multiple units, if you're creating new units,
Yeah.
when you reach a certain number and you have commercial on the first floor and several residential units on the upper floors, it is a requirement to have sprinklers and elevators.
A lot of this just seems to me that we're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. In that, you know, when the city of Lebanon was originally developed, I mean, nobody had cars. I mean, it was a walkable city, and we're trying to do this. We're trying to adapt modern life into a place that was not built for modern life, and I don't see why we can't somehow, legislatively or policy-wise, you know, try to knock the corners off that square to make it fit better in a round hole. Mayor, I've talked to you many, many times.
Yes, you have.
About my frustration about, you know, the trend to develop on open farmland in Lebanon County, which I mostly represent, versus, you know, how do we make this easier for people to come into a walkable city like Lebanon and redevelop what's already there, rather than plowing over good farmland? One of the most frustrating things I saw was not too long ago, and this was near, and it doesn't frustrate me because it's near my home, but somebody's putting affordable housing in a place nothing's walkable. You have to own a car. That's not affordable housing. Affordable housing is something that's here in Lebanon City. And, you know, we see this all across Pennsylvania as well. Our third-class cities are all suffering from the same plight. You know, what you're doing here and what you're seeing here in Lebanon is not uncommon amongst third-class cities in the state. It's just frustrating to me that we haven't been proactive in making redevelopment of already existing urban areas where the infrastructure already exists, rather than building, you know, brand spanking new stuff out. And you alluded to it in your testimony, creating a suburban sprawl. So I mean,
You asked, what can we do?
yeah, I
We
mean,
have to
it's
make
like,
it financially
Exactly.
feasible to do.
yeah, and you know, Mr. Wenger, I mean, I absolutely can relate to some of your frustrations. I recently completed, it was a 10-year process, renovating my own home. You know, taking old and essentially building a new house inside and outside of an old house. But you know, in the end, I looked at the numbers. It probably would have been more financially feasible for me to just bulldoze what was there. Now, I had sentimental reasons for wanting to keep the original structure because it was in my family for 4 generations. But, you know, there's not that sentimental when you're buying a property, a dilapidated property, say in a third-class city. Why would you choose to rehab it rather than just like bulldozing it and, you know, building fresh, and maybe you can build more units, you know, that sort of thing? Do you sometimes find yourself in that same situation?
Yeah, I would love to be able to tear down a lot of this existing stuff and build new. To buy it today, to go pay, you know, how a typical 3-bed, 2-bath row home on, say, North 10th Street that needs, to me, 120 grand worth of work, they're selling for 150. You're already in the red. The house isn't worth 300.
Yeah.
To tear it down, there's another 20 grand of tear down expense after you're paying 150. If I was allowed to build 20 to 30 units there, it would make a ton of sense. You can't even build 2.
Right.
The math doesn't work.
All right. Thank you.
Of course, thank you, Chairman Diamond. Representative Jones.
Real quick, is there, here in Lebanon City, is there a vacant property reinvestment board? Is there a program for taking blighted properties, specifically blighted properties or properties that have been deemed blighted, and then putting them on the market? I know, Mayor, that you you spoke about this. Can you just build that out a little bit more? Because the reason I ask, I've had, conversations, we have all had conversations in this realm of housing affordability and availability. If we increase availability, that will start bringing prices down to be affordable. But the barriers to availability are often regulation, regulation, regulation. That's what we've run into time and time again. And I can start blaming all agencies because of the regulation, but not going down that path. One of the things I ran into, Habitat for Humanity. They could renovate 12 homes in Lancaster City, but they can't because there's a cap on how many homes they can do, right? And so they could be so much more efficient, and even if it's just one or two, Mayor, you could speak to this as far as taking blighted properties and renovate, and when you bring one property up, it brings the neighborhood up. What have you seen with that?
So we have seen that. 16 years ago, when I first got into office, we had an Elm Street program, but we lost the funding for that, so we kind of just do it on our own. But we started with putting a flower pot on every single porch in that neighborhood and going out and painting fences or painting porches, and then the next door neighbor would paint their porch, and it grew. It works.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
seen it. It
Yeah.
works. What have we done about blighted properties? We had more blighted properties 16 years ago than we have today. It's a very, very low number because housing is in demand and people are willing to try to put some sort of money into the blighted properties because there aren't a lot to obtain. We also created the land bank, and for the first year, maybe 2 years, we were able to acquire properties on judicial sale, which basically gives us a trump card. We're able to get them prior to private developers purchasing them. But there aren't any for the last several years that have come up on judicial sale because they're being acquired through private acquisition before they even get the sheriff's sale, let alone sheriff's sale. At a judicial sale, just in case you don't know, the liens and all of those things are wiped off, and that's how we're able to put more into that property than what the market value is, and hopefully just lose a little bit of money, but we're getting grant funding, so we're able to do that. We do have a vacant property committee, which we use when we're going into a big redevelopment project, like the Partridge Street redevelopment project that we did back in 2012, where we have to go in and follow the laws that are on the books for declaring an area blighted, and then we're able to use eminent domain and acquire those properties. We're also looking into a vacant property registration ordinance to require property owners to, similar to our rental license program, if you have rental units, you have to pay us a certain fee every year if your property is vacant, which again, we have such a low number, but maybe to even help give it a little bit more boost, for there are some properties out there that just aren't being rented because the people can't afford to renovate them. So we're looking at putting that on the books as well.
Yeah. So maybe, and Kyle, maybe you could, I'm sorry, Mr. Wanger, you could, I keep saying Kyle, you could maybe speak to this too. You're seeing it on your end on, you're a for-profit business. You're not, you're not running a charity. And so when you see that, are you seeing it too, where there's actually not even an availability of blighted homes anymore because they're being, they're being renovated and sold, or what has been your experience?
I mean, I drive around the city pretty regularly. There's unlimited opportunity for housing that needs to be fixed and made prettier. It's buying it for the price that allows someone like me to make a profit.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. It costs too much.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even really a policy problem. The market is just high right now. Expenses are high. And you can't sell it for what the property is going to be worth when you're done putting the money into it.
Understood.
I go and I'd fill out a request to get all the condemned properties in Lebanon City. I hit that list frequently. And you deal with a lot of just unreasonable sellers. They own this stuff. I don't know why they still own it. It's a liability for them, but they want an astronomical price for it.
Yeah. And it's a long legal process to attain one of those properties through eminent domain or as a blighted property, like I know I'm fairly familiar with the legal process, and that's a 2-year
Yeah.
that's usually about a 2-year
If someone's
process.
not paying their taxes,
Right.
it is 2 years plus.
Yeah.
But if the taxes get paid, then it won't go
re-
up for sheriff or judicial sale.
And it resets
Yeah.
the clock.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Representative Schlegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And given that I'm clearly the oldest person in this room, I'm going to reserve the right of calling everybody by their first name. Kyle, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway because I want to hear it from you. You just talked about the concerns with cost. Things just cost too much to do the kinds of things that we're talking about doing that are going to help people. I heard someone make the comment that really this issue and addressing this issue is about interest rates. If we lower those interest rates, we're going to help to obviously cut costs, and that could go a long way. This is part of the quote someone did not say. It was President Trump, actually, by the way, who knows something about real estate and developing. Any truth to that? From your perspective, you lower the interest rates, or at least and significantly, that's going to help to address the issue that we're talking about.
I don't think that'll help it. I actually think it might, rates come down. I think values go up. I think people will be able to pay more for a house because their borrowing power might be a little more. I don't see it helping. I just think the stuff's just going to, and I've only been doing this for a decade. I've only really experienced this trajectory of value. So I haven't experienced this. So I don't want to keep saying it's going to go up, but I think lower rates will make the values go up. It's a supply and demand issue, and we just have no supply, and we have a lot of demand here.
I appreciate the perspective, which is why I'm glad I asked the question, even though I thought I knew the answer to it, but I wanted to hear it from you. And Caitlin, if I may, you had talked a little bit about early in your testimony the partnerships that you're developing with other counties, Dauphin and Cumberland, Adams, I think, and Perry in particular. Can you just give one example of some progress that you have made with the other counties?
Absolutely. So we have started up a regional, there's not a title yet, sorry, the regional coordination meeting between these counties. And the goal is to actually go in on regional grants to be able not to build houses. There's no grants that are going to fund that across multiple counties currently, but to do education for tenants, to do education for landlords, to increase the ability for the coordinators or the directors to go out and be able to provide policy updates in the community, to meet with individuals like Kyle or even the mayor in these different regions and be able to fund like brainstorming sessions, so that essentially we're trying to get grants so that there's more power being put behind how do we solve this issue, boots on the ground. Another thing that I've really valued and that I've heard from the other coordinators/directors is being able to learn from each other. Because again, this is not a Lebanon County issue, this is a Commonwealth issue, which you guys have obviously heard through other testimony and understand well. So to be able to learn from what is working in other counties and then bring it back and implement it in ours is a huge benefit, because this isn't a problem that has never happened, but this is a problem that's happening on a scale that no one person can solve. Every question that you've asked is a great question, but changing one code won't solve this problem. Changing interest rates won't solve the problem. This is a multifaceted, again, domino effect issue that's happening, again, not only in Pennsylvania, but across the county and country, sorry. So point being, I think the collaboration is the key to understanding the value between the regions.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And we're certainly glad to have you in the leadership position, because one of the things that I always thought from the very beginning with the development and the use of the housing study is that we needed leadership, and now we have it. So thank you very much, and it's great to bring Kyle into the fold as well, because I think that's been very insightful and informative. Mayor Capello, you made a comment early in your testimony, and you talked about the first-time home buyer program, and I got the impression that the program as it exists now has changed from some time ago, and I kind of got the impression that you thought that earlier program for first-time home buyers was better than my words, not your words, but than the existing program. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
So I think we were talking about like the rehabilitation and before you could sell a property to the homeowner and then use rehab funds to rehab it, and then at the end, as long as it was in compliance, you were good. Now the redevelopment authority has to do all the rehab costs up front before they sell it to a first-time home buyer, and that's where the difficulty, because they need to get upfront money before. The other way, the person buying the property would be purchasing the property and they're paying for those costs. We're just paying for the rehabilitation costs through the grant program. But now everything has to be upfronted by the redevelopment authority. That's who we partner with. So that's the biggest change. The first-time home buyer program, again, the cost of homes has significantly increased, that there really aren't a lot of homes available that meet that income threshold and the amount of the home that would be permitted to be purchased. So that makes it even more difficult. So while there's many people that want to buy their first home, the supply isn't there, and the income limitations and just all of those, the financial limitations don't allow. So we really have a very extremely low number of people who are utilizing the program for all of those factors.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to thank you all very much. This was incredibly insightful. We're going to move to our second panel now. Thank you again for taking the time. I also want to mention, while we're making that turnover, we have been joined online by Representative Joe Hogan. He's the Deputy Chair for the Policy Committee on Affordability Issues, representing the 142nd District in Bucks County, as well as Representative Eric Nelson, who's the Deputy Chair on Energy, representing the 57th District in Westmoreland County. Thank you both very much for being here. Rolling into our second panel, we've got Brian Smith. He's the Executive Director of Lebanon County Christian Ministries. We've got Christine Hartman. She's the Administrator for the Community Action Partnership of Lancaster and Lebanon Counties. And then we also have Jocelyn Stakem, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, who's the CHIP Coordinator and Housing Specialist for the Lebanon County Mental Health, Housing, Intellectual Abilities, and Early Intervention Program. That one is a mouthful. Same rules as we had before, guys. We'd love to hear from you for 3 to 5 minutes, then we'll turn it over to members for questions. We're here to learn from you, so please feel free to jump in at any point. Mr. Smith, we are going to start with you.
Well, good morning. Thanks for allowing us to be here. I'm going to shift it up a little bit, and I provide you some written testimony, have some conversation. I first wanted to thank Kyle for being here. I think in this panel, these two panels, Kyle is the one who has stepped up privately and said, I want to make a difference in this community. We're all part of agencies and organizations, and utilizing those resources, we'd like to think in a positive way. Kyle has been a tremendous asset to our group since his engagement. And I had to apologize to him for throwing him under the bus and to get him in front of y'all this early in the day. But I'd just like to say, what's affordability? Right? I mean, what is affordability? Affordability looks different for all of us. We've talked about home ownership. The discussion was, how do we look at home ownership? Home ownership is part of this entire need, and it's extremely important. And I think there's a lot of data that shows that home ownership changes the way we invest in our properties, the way we keep them, the way they look. But home ownership is not even possible if we can't take care of basic needs and basic necessities. And food, clothing, and other resources. At Lebanon County Christian Ministries, our mission is to share the love of Jesus through food, shelter, connections, promote well-being, and a healthy community. So I roll that out real quickly. It's 3 pillars of work. It's food, it's shelter, and it's connections. And what I'd like to share with you is that I think that it's important for agencies like ours to be able to support the needs of individuals in our community who are facing all different types of poverty. we talk about poverty, oftentimes we talk about poverty in the fashion of dollars and cents, right? Our federal government defines poverty based upon your income, but the reality is that our poverty is much bigger than that. We have housing poverty. When we look at the housing study for Lebanon County, the number of homes that individuals are living in that are not completely built out, lacking in running water and kitchens, lacking in bathroom facilities. We have people living in those environments. We look at poverty of time pressure, things that are causing individuals to just not have the ability to get where they need to be and be able to function and get resources to address basic things like medical care. It just doesn't exist. These elements of poverty are the basis where we need to start. And sometimes we forget that we talk about these people, but they're humans. They're human. They're your neighbors, right? They're people that are living down the street from you. They're people that you interact with. They're the people that you buy your groceries from, and they're humans. And sometimes we forget that. Yeah, my former pastor used to say, I was a man before I was a pastor. And I'd like you guys remember that you were humans before you were representatives. Something's changed, right? But at the end of the day, these are our neighbors that we need to care for. We need to provide dignified environments for. And frankly, we need to do what our vision statement is, and that's investing in the people so that we can improve lives. We can talk about investing in buildings. We can talk about investing in zoning changes, but we are absolutely in a space where we are not investing in our neighbors. When we have a problem with our neighbor, we go to Facebook. We don't go to their door, right? We've created an environment where we're just struggling with that. And I'm just asking you just to take a minute and say, how does housing relate back to just humans? I want to share a little bit with you about our Uplift Light program. I provided you a report that's a detailed data report about our Uplift Light program, but what I wanted to address is bring it back to the human factor, that in this process, we have individuals that come to our ministry who are asking for assistance for basic needs like utility assistance, like clothing, like how do they get connected with another partner agency. And one of the things that we've done is we've broken down the barriers to make it a human approach. And we actually sit in a room with no computers and a notepad, and we have a conversation with a person across the table from us because we want to know what it is that's on their hearts and what's on their minds so that we can refer them to places, that we can connect them with resources, that we can make their day tomorrow a little better than it is today. And then we want to evaluate that. We want to see what's happening. And what you'll see in here is by investing in folks, and we're not talking about big dollars, right? We're talking in today's hearings, we're talking about putting elevators into buildings that are going to cost $250,000, sprinkler systems. You know, beyond just the install, it's the annual maintenance on things like that, right? The annual maintenance on, it's going to be the fees that are assessed because you have a sprinkler system by the water authority, by the municipality. These are real things that are going to happen on that investment piece. But investing in the humans, this program that we're doing is an average investment of $215 in a household. And frankly, when we started looking at the data, my heart was like, we're going to look at this data because we're going to identify that this value of $215 doesn't exist, and we're not changing the individual's situation. And I was wrong. And we dug into it. We interviewed 605 households in a 15-month period of time, and 20% of them followed up with a phone call back to us, or when we called, they answered to do an evaluation where they're at in 3 months. And we found out that they're less food insecure. They're more food secure. We found out that they're actually more current on their utility payments. We found out that they have a little bit of a savings. We found that they're moving in the right direction because we've invested in the person to improve their life. And I think that it's important for us to, my friends that are here today, they're all, just experts in the work they do. And these two lovely humans beside me are going to talk about some really, really important stuff that's going on in our community. But I've just felt really compelled to make sure that when we leave here today, we talk about the fact that we're talking about our neighbors, not a structure, not a building, and we're talking about humans. Maybe I should have read my testimony. I just feel really passionate. I had an opportunity to meet y'all once before, and I sat there and read it, and I just thought, again, you guys are humans, and I want to just share where my heart is that I think as a community, this community of Lebanon, I will speak to Lebanon. I appreciate, South Londonderry has its own challenges, right? South Londonderry in our food hunger mapping study was one of our top food insecure spaces in Lebanon County. Most folks wouldn't have thought of that. Russ, your point of housing that's affordable housing that's not on a transit line, right? And these are the things that Caitlin and the team are doing, is identifying, like, what's our transit line look like? What's it look like to map that? And how do we realign things? I cannot think of a better time to be part of this community than right now. Because what's happening is individuals and organizations are taking their shield off and they're saying, you know what, it's not about me. It's not about my organization. It's about this community, and how can we invest in what's happening here? And community-based organizations are coming together with government. We got private-public partnerships. We got guys like Kyle who are stepping up to the plate. And I think that that coordination and that collaboration is what's going to make change happen in this community. And we're going to do all of it with a focus of that we're trying to impact human beings to make their life better tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Stakem, is that correct?
That's right.
Fantastic.
Thank you. Well, I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, and I think that Representative Rowe, you did touch on it, that my title alone is a mouthful. So I don't think it comes as a shock that the county mental health system, or the mental health system in general, is complicated to navigate. It's full of acronyms, some of which I will touch on in my testimony, and I may go a little bit off script like Brian touched on. And then you add housing to that, and that's another complicating factor that we deal with now. So I'll just explain that I am the CHIP coordinator and housing specialist for Lebanon County Mental Health, Intellectual Disabilities, and Early Intervention Program, another mouthful. CHIP, for the context of this meeting, stands actually for Community Hospital Integration Project Program. More specifically, I deal with housing programs and other programs that are geared toward adults aged 18 years and older who have been diagnosed with a serious and persistent mental illness. Lebanon County must follow the Office of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services Bulletin, which will define the adult priority group for planning and service development for adults with SMI. Those disorders include bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, other specified schizophrenia, spectrum and psychotic disorder, and borderline personality disorder. So we are tied to serving those individuals with those disorders. Addition to that, we will adhere to the criteria set by OMSATS for the cost centers, which will navigate the programs that we develop, and the appropriate reporting and monitoring for service development. One of those bulletins, which I did specify in my testimony, is titled Housing Support Services, which enable us to provide to mental health consumers, the recipient, to access and retain permanent, decent, affordable housing which is acceptable to them, which will mean something to each individual that we serve. There are two services that fall underneath this category: supportive living, which is provided to an individual in a setting in which they do not hold a lease, and as a condition of retaining the housing, the individual must receive community-based behavioral health services. The setting may be a private residence or apartment, and the services may also include life skills or treatment. The other service is supportive housing, which is a evidence-based practice. These services are provided in a setting where the consumer would hold a lease, and there is no requirement that services be in place in order to keep that lease. Some of the services which I've listed, but I'll just touch on, could be housing location or relocation, skills training, emergency rent or utility payments, rent guarantees, security deposits, repair guarantees, interim rent assistance, or assistance in obtaining housing benefits. Under this category, we operate a variety of housing programs and services for our individuals. In fiscal year 24-25, we served 95 individuals in our housing programs. We operate 2 transitional housing programs that serve individuals coming from a variety of backgrounds. They could include the foster care system, inpatient hospitalization, incarceration, or some unhoused environment. These programs would offer a safe place for individuals to gain a valuable opportunity and work with a dedicated housing worker as they gain skills to move on to the next step, whatever that may be. Length of stay could vary anywhere from several months to a max of 18 months. 3 of our programs are more permanent housing in nature, and that means there's no set limit for duration of stay. They can remain in the unit for as long as that setting would meet their needs. We also oversee another program where a housing worker would meet someone in the community, and that's typically in their own dwelling, and they're assisting them to keep that dwelling. I just want to mention quickly that we do not operate any of these programs alone. We work with a variety of community partners two of which are here beside me today, also in the audience. We also work with Community Services Group, Keystone Human Services, the Lebanon County Housing and Redevelopment Authority, Threshold, and WellSpan Philhaven, of which we could not do this work alone. I just wanted to briefly mention that there's other housing categories that are not available in Lebanon County, but you may see them in some of the other communities, either through the policy work that you do or the other communities that you serve. The most applicable to the adults that we work with would be either community residential rehabilitation, personal care home, or long-term structured residence, or enhanced specialized personal care home. Of note, Lebanon County does not have any CRRs or LTSRs within their system of care, but like I said, you may find them in some of the surrounding counties to Lebanon. Each county must choose and operate the housing initiatives that work best for them while meeting the needs of their constituents. The money and funding available to that county will also play a part in the decision-making process. We do partner with several of the larger personal care homes that exist within this county, though the county mental health program does not provide any funding for this. We do have one specialized personal care home in Lebanon, which serves 8 of our individuals. The funding for that is provided through CHIP funds, base funding, and Health Choices reinvestment, while the individual pays their room and board through Social Security income. As mentioned, funding for the county housing programs is based on the above allowable cost centers and is comprised usually of federal, state, and county funds, with county funds being a match. These funds are part of the Community Health Services Block Grant, of which multiple departments participate in. It should be noted that there is some flexibility with these funds. However, you're still limited by the constraints of the cost center guidelines. The past several years, this funding has been flat, which creates a system where counties do struggle to maintain their existing services without any increase. Additionally, the Health Choices system does not pay for any housing or any of the support services that are necessary to accompany the housing piece in serving this population. The mental health system is heavily reliant on base funds to support the housing programs and services that it creates, as well as the ability to sustain it year over year. The county mental health program is classified as the funder of last resort. This means that we serve extremely low-income individuals, many of whom do not have any insurance or may be part of the Health Choices system. This is very important to keep in mind as we examine the current average market rate for a one-bedroom apartment in Lebanon can range anywhere between $800 and $1,470 a month, while the maximum Social Security income per individual is currently at $994 per month. Another complicating factor that I'll briefly touch on is the intellectual disability system, which is vastly different than the mental health system, which is based on waiver, which the state does determine slots for. It is the responsibility of the administrative entity to perform function for the waiver and manage enrollment. The number provided for each waiver capacity commitment cannot be exceeded or modified without the approval of ODP, which is the Office of Developmental Programs. The AEs continue to be responsible for ensuring that individuals needing services are enrolled in the waivers where there is available capacity. I offer all this information if you asked me to touch on how my work may impact your future work in policy and legislation. What I can share in my years of working in mental health housing is that it's really not just about the housing. It's about the support services that must go hand in hand with the housing in order for that individual to be most successful. Those are the stories that I have seen the most success, the ones that have come from a long-term state hospitalization who are now in their apartment, many of them for several years. The ones who have turned 18 and just needed someone to offer some guidance and support as they make the next step into becoming an adult. These services typically go unnoticed and do not fit neatly into any funding stream, but they remain a vital piece of the work that we do in meeting the needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Administrator Hartman.
Good morning. Sorry. Again, thank you for this opportunity. Good morning. My name is Christine Hartman. I am the director of just the Lebanon County Community Action Partnership, not Lancaster. That's bigger fish than I want to fry. Across Pennsylvania, 42 community action agencies serve all 67 counties of the Commonwealth. In 2025 alone, community action agencies serve more than 523,000 individuals, an increase of over 72,000 people from the previous year. Community action is much more than a single service. Programs vary from county to county, but the mission of every agency remains the same: reducing poverty, strengthening families, and creating pathways to stability. In communities across Pennsylvania, community action agencies are increasingly sounding the alarm about one issue that touches every aspect of stability: affordable housing. Organizations such as Bucks County Opportunity Council, Westmoreland Community Action, Center for Community Action, South Central Community Action Programs, and many others have expanded housing and homelessness prevention programs because the need continues to grow faster than local services can keep pace. Agencies across the Commonwealth are seeing the same realities: rising rents, limited affordable housing, growing wait lists for assistance, and more working families living one unexpected expense away from homelessness. Today, 44.6% of PA renters are spending more than 30% of their income on rent. And in 2025, of the 3.4 million people who search for services on PA Navigate, Pennsylvania's closed-loop referral platform, over 27% of those searches were for some form of housing need. Housing instability is no longer isolated to large cities. Rural communities, suburban counties, and small towns throughout Pennsylvania are facing the same pressures. Families who are employed full-time are still struggling to afford housing. Seniors on fixed incomes are choosing between medication and rent. Young adults and first-time workers are finding it nearly impossible to secure affordable apartments near employment opportunities. When we talk about affordable housing, we are not simply talking about buildings. We are talking about health, education, workforce development, family stability, and the future strength of our communities. Right now, too many Pennsylvania families are paying more than 30% and often more than 50% of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. That math simply does not work. When rent consumes half a paycheck, families cut back on food, childcare, transportation, and preventative health care. Community action agencies see the ripple effects every day. Children change schools repeatedly because families are forced to move. School attendance suffers when parents are living farther from work and reliable transportation. Stress and unstable housing contribute to worsened physical and mental conditions. Homelessness prevention teams across the state are seeing more families seeking help for the first time in their lives. Housing affordability is also deeply connected to Pennsylvania's workforce and economic future. Employers need workers who can afford to live in the communities where they work. When nurses, teachers, childcare workers, first responders, construction workers, and service employees are priced out of their communities, businesses struggle to recruit and retain staff. Longer commutes increase transportation costs, employee turnover, and workforce shortages. Community action agencies understand that affordable housing is not just a social service issue, it's an economic development issue. Research consistently shows that stable housing improves educational outcomes, lowers reliance on emergency systems, and strengthens local economies. More so, when we explore healthcare costs, we know that housing insecurity leads to being 50% less likely to go to a follow-up doctor's visit, and when housing needs are addressed, healthcare costs go down, something that we know everyone can appreciate. Every dollar invested in homelessness prevention and affordable housing saves public dollars in emergency shelter, hospital care, law enforcement, and crisis response systems. At Lebanon County Community Action Partnership, we operate on a budget of approximately $2 million. Of that, $1.4 million supports the medical assistance transportation program. That leaves limited funding available for all other services that we provide. In 2025 alone, Lebanon County spent $199,635.50 on rental assistance and $37,732 on emergency shelter, serving 783 individuals. That represents nearly 40% of our available budget outside of transportation services. Because resources are limited, our staff must consistently find innovative ways to stretch every dollar. Currently, we are contributing up to $650 to prevention and first month's rent assistance so that we can help as many households as possible. With a statewide overall average being roughly $1,300 to $1,680, if we are attempted to cover those full amounts, our funding would disappear very quickly. For families seeking emergency shelter assistance, we must first ensure that all other available resources have been explored unless there is a condemnation or domestic violence situation, which we serve those people immediately. This challenge is being repeated in communities throughout Pennsylvania. Community action agencies statewide are increasingly focused on homelessness prevention because keeping families housed is far less costly and far less traumatic than trying to rebuild stability after homelessness occurs. What works is not a mystery. Building more housing at a range of price points where streamlining development process that maintain quality and safety, preserving existing affordable housing before units are lost to deterioration or redevelopment, expanding rental assistance and eviction prevention programs to help families remain stable during temporary crisis, supporting partnerships between housing, transportation, workforce development, and healthcare system, encouraging mixed income communities where seniors, young families, teachers, healthcare workers, and service employees can all live and thrive together. Investing in supportive housing models that combine affordable housing with case management and supportive services for individuals facing additional barriers. This conversation is ultimately about the kind of communities we want Pennsylvania to be. Affordable housing is how we say to our neighbors, "You belong here." Recently, I heard someone say, "None of us are home until all of us are home." Housing is how we ensure that hard work can still lead to stability, dignity, and opportunity. I'll close with a simple picture. Imagine a child who sleeps in the same bed every night, catches the same school bus every morning, and sees the same teacher all year long. Their parents know the rent will be manageable next month and the month after that. That stability allows families to plan, to save, to focus on education and employment instead of crisis. That is what affordable housing creates: stability, health, opportunity, and hope. And when we invest in stable housing for families, we invest in stronger communities, stronger schools, a stronger workforce, and a stronger Pennsylvania for all of us. Lastly, I want to remind and challenge us to consider: we can continue to be articulators of the problems, or we can be the problem solvers. I hope that more of us can be the problem solvers. Thank you for your leadership and for advancing policies that make housing attainable for the people who already call our communities home and for those that hope to. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Administrator Hartman. I do want to mention we have also been joined online by Representative Ledbetter from the 109th District representing Columbia County. Thank you, Representative Ledbetter, for joining us. I've got two quick questions. First of all, we are live streaming this on a variety of social media platforms, and we typically get people who are dropping comments in and asking questions. And it came in at the tail end of the last panel, but I will put it to you guys since you are here. And feel free to answer if you're not 100% sure the answer, that is fine. But Daniel Cassidy on our TikTok stream asked, why does it cost $100,000 in soft costs just to get a permit for a house before you can even start construction? I know constructions aren't necessarily your wheelhouse, but in the work that you guys do when you're helping somebody find a home, or as you referenced, right, restoring the housing before it reaches that point of blight, can you guys speak to any of those costs before somebody can even just move in and call it home? What are those big cost drivers that aren't, putting nails in the wall and laying flooring, but just the soft costs up front? Is that in any of your wheelhouse?
Not as an expert, other than just being around the environment and individuals talking about. I mean, we're talking about water runoff, we're talking MS4, we're talking about just DEP rules and regulations, development, so forth. I think it's not even just the $100,000. You're talking. We sometimes forget that the housing units that we see going up today, like this started 3 to 5 years ago in process. Like, it's not like somebody bought the land and they built a house in 3 weeks. You're talking years of time for housing development to go up. So that's not a great answer, but it's sunk in a lot of those land development costs.
That mirrors what we heard at our hearing yesterday, where the developers and the builders were telling us it can take 2 years to even get the first shovel in the ground. What family that's already paying a mortgage on one hand that has to buy a lot, maybe buys the lot for $100,000 and then has to spend another $100,000 before they even put the first shovel in the ground and wait 2 years? How do you possibly, as a young working family, carry all of those costs at once? So thank you for that. Ms. Hartman, your closing comment, I think, is especially poignant about being not just articulators, but being problem solvers. Because a lot of the questions, the last panel summarized it well when they said there's no single silver bullet, right? We're talking about land development costs, we're talking about codes, we're talking about instability, we're talking about the exacerbating issues of utility costs and food costs and all these other things that you pointed out, right? Create crisis, not stability. So what would be something that could be done today that, again, it's not the silver bullet, but it will at least move the needle in the right direction, whether it is one simple regulatory fix, whether it's something like, the governor's action team, which exists on the economic side of things, right? If you have a local business that's struggling, the action team comes in, tries to help out, tries to streamline processes to save that business. Would it be something like that that would exist to come in and provide relief for immediate housing needs or something like that? What would be something that today, if whether it was the legislature, the regulators, the governor, the local governments, the code enforcement, the planning commissions, could somebody do something that would make your job and the people, and this could be for any of you, the people that you work with, just breathe a little sigh of relief?
You could write me a really big check. I am, we do eviction prevention, rental assistance. We see, different facets every day. We have, people that, once a year they might call and say they need rental assistance, or we have that mom that's done it forever and just has one, a sick family member that they have to travel for to use extra gas money that puts them over the edge. So I'm all about funding, and I'm serious. Like, if somebody could write me a really big check, that would be amazing. I would love to have somebody come in with a $1,300 rent and pay it all, and we can't. If I paid every person's rent that was over $1,000, I'd be out of funding probably within 6 months. So that's why we kind of got to cap it off at a certain amount.
Well, I'll always take funding or money, but that's an easy answer. In mental health, I would say even when we can figure out a way, and we have, to create new housing programs, we always have to figure out, is this sustainable? Because even if you can figure out at the beginning, say that there's funding available for a new project, like, can we sustain this if the funding runs out? So that's always, I think we're very lucky because we have been good in Lebanon County with how we manage our money and working with other departments about what works in our county. So we have been able to bring some new things to the county, but I think sustainability always is a question in serving the individuals that we have. I would love to serve 100 more people than we did last year or the year before. And I would say, similar to the first panel, like the availability of landlords to take a chance on somebody who has a substance abuse issue or a mental health issue, because they can get fair market rent, where I may only be able to pay them half of that. But I'll probably be able to keep them in that unit a heck of a lot longer because I have the support services that can come along with it.
Director Smith, I noticed on here the statistics rates that you cited for, before and after changes for people who were part of your intake program. Food security rises, households behind in utilities drop, employment increases, and specifically to what Ms. Stakem just pointed out, right, when we talk about kind of the self-perpetuating problem that is especially people with substance abuse issues, and then they're not able to keep their job, and then they lose their home, and then that property becomes blighted. The reverse is true too, right, where the number one coefficient for people to recover from substance abuse issues is having gainful employment. So if they have a job, they'll get better, they'll be able to take care of their property. So being able to continue that. So is there something that, again, when government gets involved, doesn't necessarily always make things better. Look at code enforcement, for example. But from your side, from the private perspective, is there something getting the state out of the way? Or is there a way that the state could be helpful so that the good work that you were doing could be expanded?
Yeah, I don't know if it's getting them out of the way. It's understanding that there's this merging of wraparound services. And again, looking at SNAP benefits, looking at WIC. These programs are supplemental programs that we all have to wrap around to support. So we saw a significant impact back in November when we had a SNAP scare. It's called a SNAP scare, right? It eventually happened. We had a federal government shutdown. We had a delay in the LIHEAP, and we had no state budget. So the state government was leaning into, the federal government was leaning into community-based organizations where we leaned into really aligning with the community partners to what Justin's saying is, like, this is about wraparounds, right? And again, going back to, this is home ownership, right? We want to focus on home ownership at some level, we can't get to home ownership if we can't get gainful employment, stability, wraparound services, some longitudinal time inside of housing that develops an individual to be able to say, now I want to get into home ownership. So I don't think it needs to be get out of the way. It's how do we align and how do we collaborate and partner to make sure that we're taking folks in the right direction. And then remembering that there's going to be a period of time where now the employment has gained to the point where they're earning enough dollars that they start to lose some of those resources. And then we have the benefits cliff where all of a sudden I'm not eligible for SNAP. I don't get medical assistance anymore. I can't afford health care from my employer. And I went from here to here. And that is a significant challenge, which is a whole nother probably policy forum.
Representative Jones.
Well, thank you. And Mr. Smith, I appreciate you starting us off with the reminder that we're talking about fellow neighbors, friends, family, people down the street, humans. And so, and I do appreciate also too the reminder that we can continue to articulate the problems. That is something that we have no shortage of. And so we can continue to address those problems, and I think we should. I mean, piece by piece, we have to push back on the burdensome regulations that are foisted upon us either by the state or locally. Those are very important issues that we have to face. However, I think that what I've seen, and it's been encouraging for me, and I think I've heard it here, the goal is to give people a hand up, not a handout. And in doing so, I think the ultimate goal should be to move forward efficiency so that we actually don't have to write the big check, right? We would get to the point where we have given people a hand up to get more people off of and out of these programs and into gainful employment and those. You're never going to remove all stress. We're all going to have stress, anxiety, which impacts all of our mental health. However, giving that hand up, and Mr. Smith, you talked about how relatively small that can be, just to set people on the correct trajectory. If there's a question in there, it's my question is, what efficiencies do we need to see? Because our offices, we provide LIHEAP, we provide rent rebate. We have some of these services at our offices. But I think very similar to your role, our offices are oftentimes referral services, right? Now we have some programs where we can help people directly, but very often I'm redirecting people because if they walk through our doors, they're in need. They're in need. They very well may be in crisis, and we redirect our friends, family, neighbors to places where their needs can be met. I really appreciate what you're doing, where you're bringing organizations together and you know where to send people to get that hand up. What more can be done instead of looking to the government? What more can be done to bring our community organizations, faith-based organizations, how can we streamline that connectivity within our own communities to meet the needs so that we get people out of these programs?
Yeah, I think that we're actively trying to do it, that we know what each other are doing. We're not having mission creep. We're not stepping on each other's toes, and we're staying in our lane, understanding that this is my lane, this is your lane, and how do we do that? When we start to get competitive and duplicate in the social services world, there's nothing good that's going to come out of that.
Right.
One of the things that's really good about our Uplift Light program is it's a partnership. So when we're talking about $215 investment, we're also talking about if the LIHEAP season is open, we're requiring them to apply for LIHEAP first before we're going to be the first line of assistance because the benefit might be greater. Then once that's established, then we can become either the secondary support or an additional support to walk alongside of those individuals. And what we're doing is we are investing in keeping people in their homes. And again, this could be home ownership, right? So just because you own your home doesn't mean you can afford your utilities. I think we're all feeling that, right? So when we look at that, one of the things that we've talked about is causation versus correlation of some of our data. So dating pre-COVID, we were investing about $15,000 annually in our utility assistance program. And so if I'm looking at a plot and I say this is where $15,000 is, and I look at the number of nights stay in our homeless shelter, it was up here. COVID did a lot of interesting things for us, and one of those was the ERAP system, where we just dumped tons of dollars into utility assistance, rent assistance. And what we didn't do during that period of time was walk alongside of individuals. We just threw money at it. And on the backside, as we pulled those dollar resources back, folks were like, wait, where'd that support go? And nobody was walking with them to talk about financial planning, budgeting. And I'm not talking about like, don't go to Starbucks today. I'm talking about real budgeting to say, hey, your water bill comes on a quarterly basis, not monthly. And you need to prepare for that. What's that going to look like? People literally understanding where their dollars are going. So as we walked through that, we began to, on the backside of COVID, increase our investment in utility assistance to the tune of about $80,000 to $90,000. So $15,000 to about $80,000 to $90,000. But what happened was our nights of stay in our homeless shelter actually crossed on that axis and came back down. So I wish I had the specific data to say that those are people that we prevented from going homeless, but there's some causation there that says, hey, if I invest in keeping people in their homes, they're not going to end up in a homeless shelter. And that's a partnership again, right? So you're going to address LIHEAP, you're going to refer to us, we're going to assist, we're going to refer to somebody else, and we begin to walk with people more deeply and long term.
That's a great goal. Thank you.
Yeah.
Online, we've got Deputy Chair Nelson. Deputy Chair Nelson, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully my mic's coming across. Can you guys hear me loud and clear?
You're all good.
All right, wonderful. I really appreciate both the testimony and the dialogue. I know we had mentioned Westmoreland Community Action, which I'm a Westmoreland County guy, and we're really fortunate to have our Westmoreland Community Action, help families as they get through this transition. I was late today because one of the boroughs that we were meeting with is just really getting squeezed by MS4 and permitting delays as they're trying to balance and convert properties on the edge of being blighted to be reused for first purchase homes. They can't get through the paperwork process. If Mr. Smith, if you're able to touch on ways that, or the oftentimes we don't hear organizations like Community Action talking about the impact of permitting delays. We have the same community, 4 months has been trying to get a private investor who wants to restore pharmaceutical services in that community, and they can't get the permits done to be able to move forward with a project. Can you touch on ways that your organizations may be able to help us to let government realize the sense of urgency and just the delay in economic opportunity that's happening?
No. I think we've been uniquely positioned, and I'm gonna probably dance this question because the real answer is I don't know how we do it. I know what we're gonna try to do. We've been uniquely positioned that Lebanon County Christian Ministries is CAP-like. It's not to take anything away from Christine, but Christine, they have their kind of work that they do and we do, and we were just both at the CAP conference for the state. The Housing Collaborative project here in Lebanon, when we had envisioned this coming out of our housing study, was 100% about bringing people to sit in a room around a table from a diverse background to remove those barriers. And I think we do it in our everyday work, right? I mean, we try to remove barriers for our success individually, no matter what it is. We just have to get the right people sitting around the table. So probably you did a great thing today that you were at the municipality and there's people that are aligning, but we just filled out the NAP application for nonprofits through DCED.
That's a burden. That's
Right,
a burden.
right. And I uploaded the same document 3 times and put a narrative in twice. Like, I would encourage you to just run through the process individually and understand what it takes to get something achieved. And once you do it, again, you're human before you're a representative. Like, when people are trying to do these things, it's like you start scratching your head, like, who created this? And why are there so many barriers to success? And I think zoning is probably the same thing. If you were to be the builder or the revitalizing entity, what were the steps? And can you sit back and go, do we really need all of these steps? So I don't know that was a good answer. My no was probably better.
Well, as we shift to Christine and just even trying to help focus, because that's a pretty broad question, the support for programs like MS4 that are really burdensome throughout the state is that, well, this program is really important to our rivers, but we're seeing the year-over-year consequence that programs like these are preventing houses from being repurposed or important services that a community needs from being able to move forward. Christine, you're not an MS4 stormwater specialist, but if more houses were available, how does that impact the population that you're working with? Because the answer is embracing abundance and helping people to get their employment, but also they need a place to go aside from the Knights Inn.
There's a saying in the community action world, if you've seen one community action, you've seen one community action. We are all different. So Lebanon County Community Action, we are not in the market of building homes or refurbishing homes. I'm a very small agency. I have 8 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. We have a very small budget. The only real housing realm that I am in is we do have a 3-unit transitional home in Annville that we oversee. But as far as doing new builds, et cetera, I don't have a hand in that, so I really can't answer that question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Chairman Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really do appreciate all of you sharing today, and I admire all of you. I don't know how you do what you do. I am one of those people who I care about other people, but I have this empathetic, and if I would deal with what you folks deal with on a daily basis, I would not be able to sleep when I go home. So I admire you for being able to do what you do. But earlier you said, write a big check. We will never get to the point where we won't need to have folks like you who need to help people who are in need. We're never going to get to that point. I mean, we already know that. Although it's a laudable goal. But you all, 2 out of 3 of you talked about writing a big check. So just for the folks at home that are listening, can you each clarify what exactly is the funding streams that you rely on?
So we're about a $1.8 million budget. About 65% is private donor dollars. We receive about 12% of our budget is state food, which then a portion of that goes out to support other agencies. And then other grants would be filling the rest of it. So for us, most of it is private donors. So I would not say of course we all want the big check, but I think that, Russ, if I could just for a second say that what we are all striving to do is have data that supports the investment in the people, that when we're done, and you're gonna not have any choice but to say, I want to partner with you and how to help people.
I was just seeing if I could pull our budget from.
Oh, I don't need
Fiscal
details.
year.
I mean, just you can.
Okay.
You can ballpark this for me.
So, the county mental health budget is in the millions of dollars. That's every program that falls under mental health. That's not just housing. That's all the providers that we serve. That's for a variety of contracts. Mm-hmm. So that would be a blend of federal, state, local. Some of that's reimbursable, if they're covered under the Health Choices system. Like I touched on, some of that will never be reimbursable because if someone doesn't have insurance, some are covered by Medicare, so it's a wide variety of funding sources, which can make it challenging in figuring out the programs that are mandated by the state that you must offer somebody, and balancing that with the programs that you should offer but are not mandated. Crisis intervention is also a program that the mental health program also has a giant portion of, which is very expensive but necessary in every county.
My budget's a little under 2 million, like I stated in my testimony. About 1.4 of that goes to our medical assistance transportation program, which is paid through by DHS, which is an entitlement program, so we get what we spend. As far as my other programs, my housing assistance program, I have a budget of $185,835. I've been flat funded since 2007. We've gotten one increase in that department since I've been at the agency in 2007, of $39,546. Our human service development grant is $86,816. That's been the same since I've been at the agency in 2007. And then my community service block grant, which is through DCED, ranges anywhere from $310,000 to $315,000, depending if they have extra money. Jocelyn stated in her testimony being part of the block grant, the county block grant. Drug and alcohol, myself, and MHIDEI are all part of that grant. We get a pot of money, and then our allocations come out of that, my 186 and my 89. But we all go around the table, and if MHID is going to have a little left over, or drug and alcohol, they can give it to myself or other departments. That's probably not going to happen anymore, just because they've been cut back on their funding, so they don't have the extra to go over. But yeah, that's my funding.
Okay, so just one last question, and this is just because I don't know enough about what you do. I mean, for lack of a better term, when you're dealing with a client, do you ever find the opportunity to cut down on your expenses by, teaming two people that you serve together? Maybe sharing resources between two people, maybe having two people live in the same place. I mean, is there any of that's able to go on under, the rubric of guidelines that you have to work under?
For mental health, we'll always see what other services are available in the community that, like Brian and Christine both touched on, like what can we borrow from or partner, who can we partner with who's already doing what we are not doing. From a rent and housing aspect, we will always, people always pay what they can. So is it 30%? Are you offering, you're part of the utility, so it's not just say we are paying, the whole bag. But yes, because we are forced with such a limited resource and trying to serve as many people as we possibly can, a very big portion of what we do is partnering with and then helping people move along so that we can serve the next person.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Diamond. I'm going to turn over to Representative Schlegel for any closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to everyone who participated in today's hearing and shared your time, your expertise, and experience. Today's discussion reinforced that affordable housing is a complex issue. We heard about the challenges families face in finding attainable housing, the pressures placed on local communities, and the obstacles that builders, nonprofits encounter when trying to meet the demand. We also heard an important common theme, that meaningful progress will require cooperation between public and private sectors, local flexibility, and policies that encourage growth rather than create additional barriers. As legislators, our responsibility is to continue reviewing practical solutions that increase housing opportunities while respecting taxpayers and the unique needs of our communities. That includes examining regulations, permitting processes, workforce shortages, infrastructure needs, and ways to support responsible development that keeps housing within reach for working families, seniors, and young people starting out. This issue is about strengthening communities, supporting economic opportunities, and ensuring Pennsylvania remains a great place where people can afford to live, work, and raise a family. I appreciate the thoughtful testimony provided today and the respectful dialogue that took place. The information shared during this hearing will help guide future conversations and potential policy considerations moving forward. Again, thank you to all our testifiers, committee members, staff, and attendees for your participation and commitment to this important issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Schlegel. I want to thank all of the testifiers, the member who joined us personally and online. I want to thank Mayor Capella for hosting us here in Lebanon City. Thank you very much for having us. I want to just commend everybody, especially my team, who put together this series of hearings we had. I think we've learned that communities all across Pennsylvania are facing unique challenges. It's a common theme that has emerged. Too many Pennsylvanians feel like the dream of homeownership is just moving further out of reach. We heard today, communities like Lebanon, homeownership isn't just about property. It's about putting down roots. It's about building stability for your children, your family, and creating something to pass on to the next generation. What we heard today is that housing is no longer just a housing issue. It affects workforce participation, family stability, mental health, poverty, and community growth. Expanding opportunities will require collaboration between state and local government, the private sector, nonprofit organizations, and community partners willing to think creatively and work together. As policymakers, our job is not just to simply identify the challenges, but to continue pursuing practical solutions that help more Pennsylvanians find stability, opportunity, and a place to call home. So we appreciate everyone who has participated throughout these three hearings that we've held on this issue and contributed to this very important conversation about housing and affordability in Pennsylvania. With that, this hearing is adjourned.